Rehman and Raheem. Surah Al-Fateha, chapter 1, verses 3 to 4 will be covered today. The Quranic guidance is about establishing the system of Deen. These are the references. I have highlighted the book, The Meanings of the Quran, Volume 1, because a number of extracts, like the previous presentation, I have taken from it directly because I thought those sum up the whole subject very well. And this is our contact in case there is any query or question regarding this presentation or any of our previous presentations. Recap verses 1 to 2 of Surah Al-Fateha. This surah is called Al-Fateha, which means that it serves as a gateway to understanding of the Quran. And if we look at this root, then some of these meanings will also be related to this aspect. Two verses are covered in this presentation, which lay down the foundations of some of the concepts which are essential to understand in order to come to grips with the program of Deen put forward by Allah in the Quran. The first verse, which we had a good explanation in the last presentation, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, sets the scene by drawing our attention to this fact that those who wish to take on the divine responsibilities of Rububiyyat in the world need to understand the divine program. So it is not about reciting this verse when we start some work. What it means is that consciously we have to think that how this project, this work which I'm going to do, how it is going to contribute towards the system of Rububiyyat. So for example, today I have recited this, which means that what we are going to do now, this presentation, it directly impacts on the system of Rububiyyat and its understanding in the world. Allah is Rabb of the whole of the universe, which means He is responsible for the sustenance and nourishment of all living beings that He has created as per His Mashiyyat. In the human world, this responsibility falls on human hands to organize human affairs within the permanent values of the Quran. And this is important to understand because Allah has provided all the means of sustenance on the planet Earth. Now it is up to human beings how they manage these by using their choice and intent and within these permanent values. And if they don't use permanent values, then the mess which we see in today's world of 2024, it is the direct result of not following these values. This falls under the system of Rububiyyat, which is the manifestation of the divine attribute of Rabb. An overview of today's presentation. Everything in the universe is carefully thought through, i.e. planned and designed, scaled and executed so that the earth has all that which is required by human beings possessing choice and intent and latent potentials. And that is the way we should view our own creation as well as on the universe around us. This is the first stage where they can employ their creative potentials to create a world around them, which can then hand them over to the next stage of their evolutionary journey of life. Since they all possess a self with latent potentials, hence they need to come to grips with the scales of their self-development based on the application of two divine attributes of Rehman and Raheem, together with other divine attributes. If they wish that their life at the self's level should continue beyond physical death, and that is important if they wish, if they make a choice, then they need to choose the guidance of Wahi, which is made available to them in the Quran. This guidance is provided to help them with a system called Ad-Deen, which is based on the permanent values and all aspects explained for guidance. If they do not follow the divine guidance, then they will fail to acquire that self which meets the criteria of Ad-Deen, and hence they will suffer the evil effects of following a path of their own unbridled desires. They need to remember that they are accountable for every deed of theirs during their finite stay on this planet. Now we go to the first two verses of today's presentation, laying the foundation for Rububiyyat. If we remember that we have already covered this second verse, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and we will cover this verse today, Ar-Rehman Ar-Raheem. And why I put them together? Because that is the way it is given in the exposition of the Quran. And I did not want to separate the two because these are very succinctly explained. When man reflects on the organization and functioning of this system of the universe, then this reality becomes unveiled before him, how that means of sustenance and nourishment keeps becoming available to everything in it, without expecting any return and compensation, due to which it reaches its state of completion, stage by stage from its point of initiation. After witnessing this astounding system of Rububiyyat, words of appreciation and admiration appear spontaneously on the tongue of every man of vision, and he spontaneously says that, O our Rabb, you have not created anything in this universe without a purpose, not for destructive purposes. These are those very men of knowledge and conviction who are in truth the ones who do hamd of Allah. So hamd is something which spontaneously comes out of our heart and mind after doing a lot of study, research in the universe around us, and of course, by looking at our own psyche as well. It is essential for the completion of this program of Allah that those tyrannical forces which are impediments on the path of the nourishment of others are removed from the path. This is the first step of Hamdiyat. So there is a lot to do under Hamdiyat. It is not just a word which is mentioned in the Quran at various places. We have to look at its context and its connotation within the system of Deen. Expanding Rehman and Raheem. In our previous presentation, we briefly looked at Allah, Hamd of Allah, the divine attribute of Rabb, and what is meant by Alameen. This helped us to understand the outline of the program of Rububiyyat of Allah in relation to mankind in the world. The Quranic guidance is made available to those human beings who, through their free volition, wish to choose the path presented by Allah in the Quran. I put down this comment here that guidance is made available to those human beings who are looking for it. Otherwise, guidance is available to everyone. The Quran is now widely available in the world, but it only makes sense to those who are looking at it from the viewpoint of solving human problems. In the next verse, the Quran has pointed to two important divine attributes which originate from the common root of Rahm. It is from this that the word Rahmat derives, and Rahmat is normally translated as nourishment, meaning that donation which fulfills someone's apparent and hidden privation, and which is given according to the requirement of the need. The word Rahim originates from this. The way in which the fetus receives nourishment within the uterus of the mother illustrates the meaning of Rahmat with clarity. That is, once the child is within the womb of the mother, it is being taken care of by the physical laws of Allah. And these are not affected directly by human beings, but indirectly these are also affected because it all depends on the health of the mother as well, who is exposed to the man-made system. Now, over here, what I've done is I put down some pictures of interest and two different words on the same planet. And here are the pictures, photos of three women, and one of them is pregnant. Child within the mother gets nourished under the direct domain of Allah. Once born, it falls under the direct domain of man-made systems. So the beauty of this system is that we can see the signs of Allah everywhere if we try to pay attention to it, if we think through these problems. But the same mother is now exposed to man-made laws. And if the man-made laws or the man-made environment is no good for her, obviously that is going to indirectly affect as well. And over here, the same child who was well protected within the womb of the mother and was being nourished as per the laws of Allah, and now this child is exposed to man-made system. And over here, there is a line of women again, mothers. Mothers remain under the domain of systems created by man. Values define their nature and form. And this is another picture which speaks for itself. And there is another picture, and we see these things particularly in underdeveloped world. And here is, I've taken a photo of a nursery, human beings are capable of creating systems based on relative values. And wherever human beings want to create something for them, they are quite capable of creating it. So that means the plight of these human beings is deliberately created by these human beings who create these nurseries as well. And here is another picture of this nursery, the way children are being taught and they're playing. And then they are now in the developed world, there are antenatal programs as well. And if we can go through some of these points or do some Google search, we can see that to what extent in the developed world these things are being practiced and to which these women, these mothers do not have any access. The whole point is to make us think, to provoke our thinking that we need the system of Rububiyat and we cannot accept the world the way it is going. Analyzing further and finer details, from the reproductive cells of man and woman, fertilization takes place and the embryo becomes established within the uterus. In this coming together within the embryo, the realizable potentials of a live human child are concealed. And this is a very pertinent sentence because if we see that between these two cells, which become, by coming together, this fertilized cell then contains all that what that human being is going to become. And those potentials are there. And it also includes all those latent potentials which can only be brought out through the permanent values. The way in which the means of nourishment are provided there to make these potentials manifest astounds people of intellect and vision. Everything is received there without any recompense and return. Sometimes we don't pay attention to these things in our daily routine of life, but these are the things to which we should, as students of the Quran, pay attention on a regular basis to convince ourselves that our path is the correct one. This is received in a completely different way from the manner after the child is born. This is one example of the displays of Allah's rahmat. Why have two words, Rehman and Raheem, have been used for the manifestation and expression of this attribute of Allah, which is based on rahmat, even though the root of both is the same? In English translations of the Quran, the words beneficent and merciful appear for these, and which really do not explain what is hidden, what is implicit in these two attributes of Allah. The Arabic language is a very scientific language. Every word in it has a root which contains a fundamental meaning, like the seed of a tree. After this, in this language, there are different forms or weightages, according to which various words keep on arising from this very root. Evolution follows the laws of Allah. Every form or weightage has a specific characteristic. So this is continuing about the Arabic language. As a result of this, even though the words which arise in various forms have the same fundamental meaning, their characteristics keep on becoming different. The word Rahimun is based on the weight of Fa'ilun, whose characteristic is that the expression of this attribute is that it is continuous, gradual, and persistent, something over a longer time scale. And the weight of Rahmanun is on Flanun, whose meaning is that the expression of this attribute is with intensity and all of a sudden. We don't have to go into these details. What is meant over here is that these two words have different scales, time scales attached to it, and different way of developing and different way of taking advantage of these two attributes. And understanding these is very important because it brings a change within our psyche and it gives us confidence that how to approach various things under the system of Deen. This difference between these two meanings demands profound reflection and reasoning. Researchers from the discipline of physical sciences have reached this conclusion that development in the things of the universe is occurring through an evolutionary process, i.e., with gradual nourishment, these keep progressing forward from their point of origin until they reach their destination of completion. And this is called progressive evolution. These evolutionary stages are traversed link by link on a continuous basis. There is no gap in these links. But sometimes it also happens that a thing jumps across various links in a single leap and adopts a new form. Ar-Rahman is related to emergent evolution. This is known as emergent evolution in their terminology. That is, from progressive evolution, then emergent evolution takes place in certain cases. These scientists are unable to explain anything about how this occurs. In the chain of cause and effect, sometimes those exceptions appear which only the hand of nature can bring into existence. And this is a quote from Viscount Samuel. From the above explanations, this fact becomes evident that the usual form of the means of nourishment which the things of the universe obtain for their development is that it keeps becoming available continuously and stage by stage. For this, the Quran has termed Allah as being Ar-Rahim. But when its appearance is in the form of emergent evolution, then he has called this Ar-Rahman. And that is important to understand that from the animalistic stage of human being to become a human being, thinking human being, is the stage where Ar-Rahman, that attribute, will come into play. In relation to human creation, the manifestation of both these attributes are noted in one verse in Surah Al-Mu'minun. The beginning of the creation of man took place from inert matter. Then conception occurred in the mother's uterus and the fetus began to develop. First, it adopted the form of a leech-like clot, then it became like a piece of flesh, then a skeleton of bones emerged in it, then a layer of flesh was wrapped over these bones. Up until this point, the technique of reproduction and development is the same for the embryos of a human being and other animals and comes into shape via a gradual process. And this is very interesting. This verse is 14 in Surah Al-Mu'minun, 23rd chapter. It's worth going through it and the verses before it and after it. Solving the hard problem of consciousness. I use this term hard problem of consciousness. If we do some search on YouTube, we'll come across a number of videos and clips which are related to this aspect, and human beings, all scholars and psychologists and neuroscientists, they haven't been able to figure out that how the nervous system is giving us consciousness. And they will have to come to the Quran to understand it. This takes place according to Allah's attribute of Rahim. After this, such a fundamental difference occurs between a human being and an animal, which is not the physical outcome of the former links of evolution. There a sudden change emerges. About this, the Quran has stated, then we created out of it another creature. And that is the interesting part, because if we look at our metacognitive attribute, that is thinking about thinking, how the thoughts are aware of the thoughts themselves. And that is an important point, because that is the point from where we are getting this ability of making choices. In other words, then Allah made it into a new kind of creation. This is the consequence of emergent evolution. According to this new creation, man becomes endowed with a self whose fundamental characteristic is choice and intent, and through the development of which it becomes enabled to traverse further evolutionary stages. For this emergent evolution, the word Ar-Rahman has appeared. So normal evolution was continuing on progressive phase, that is progressive evolution. And then suddenly man acquired this ability, this attribute, this metacognitive ability of starting to make choice and also to start thinking about thinking, and became very analytical. The development of the human self takes place through obedience of those values and instructions which are given via Wahi, revelation from Allah, when Allah stated about himself that your Rabb has inscribed for himself Rahmat. Allah has declared it as a duty upon himself to bestow the means of sustenance. And then the duty of Mu'mineen is to make arrangements for the distribution of that sustenance among mankind. Next is divine attributes help to identify and explore our latent potentials. This also means that in this rahmat, other than the means of nourishment for the physical life of man, the development of his self was also included. Here another aspect appears before us, which is a specific manifestation of his attribute of Rahmaniyat. So this term Rahmaniyat is coming from Rahman, which is related to emergent evolution. About man, it is stated in the Quran, taught man that which he knew not. In other words, Allah placed the ability to gain knowledge within man. Animals live their life according to their instinct. They do not have any need to gain knowledge from outside, therefore, they are not even bestowed with this ability. And we can differentiate between that is between animals and about our own metacognitive abilities very clearly. Some of the animals do have ability to learn some of these skills, like a dog or a monkey or a parrot, but those are very, very limited, but they cannot express themselves. This ability is specifically for human beings. Man acquires this knowledge through different ways and means, i.e. observations, experiments, study, education and teaching, lectures and discussions, etc. Knowledge is gained gradually via these methods, and whichever individual wishes to, he can achieve it. And of course, it also depends the facilities available to him as well. So the man-made system which we see around us is based on the creation of pure human intellect. So it has certain abilities even without the guidance of the Quran. In other words, we can say that in this aspect, Allah's attribute of Rahimiyat is functioning. Next is Wahi provides additional choice for self-development. But there is another form of knowledge as well, which cannot be obtained in any way whatsoever through the methods mentioned above, nor is there any role played in it of man's own effort or deed and skill. This used to be conferred from Allah directly onto his chosen righteous individuals. And that is another important point for us as students of the Quran, that since we have choice and intent kept within us, hence we are not provided guidance within us, like instinctual guidance which is provided to animals. And because of absence of that, we are given external guidance in the form of the Quran, that is Wahi through Allah, and it was sent to various messengers who were chosen by Allah. According to his program of Mashiach, Allah selects whoever he wishes specifically for this rahmat, this reality that in the acquisition of Wahi there was no role of man's own skill and effort is clear from the fact that the righteous being who was being selected and designated for this had no knowledge or inkling before receiving Wahi of this matter that he was going to be bestowed with this knowledge. And it has to be a human being among us, because once he follows it, then we can also figure out that if he can follow it, we can follow too. From this, it is evident that in the bestowing of Wahi, Allah's attribute of Rahmaniyat would manifest itself. This is why it is stated regarding this, Ar-Rahman, it is he who has taught the Quran. And these are verses taken from Surah Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman, Allama al-Quran. Knowledge of the Quran is bestowed by Rahman, and it is on this very basis that the Quran is declared as being Rahmat. It is noted in Surah Bani Israel that we send down in the Quran that which is a healing and a Rahmat for Mu'mineen. When we desire quick results in the world, so Ar-Rahman gives us that assurance, that certainty that what is given in the Quran, it can provide us quick results if we follow its guidance. To conclude these two divine attributes, we need to also keep in mind that when the Quran is understood and followed as directed with the context of the system of Deen, then it has the potential to move events at an accelerated pace, both within the self-development and also in the outer world. When human beings become fully convinced of the efficacy of any ideology, be it evil or good, they pursue it with their full ability and devotion. And we can see that around us in the human world. If this ideology becomes one of a system, for example, the power structure under a man-made world, then those who are in power never give up. The Quran declares this to be batil. The attribute of Rahman provides the basis for the system of Haqq and instructs us that even if batil is everywhere, if we start to act on this collectively, that is the sum total of individuals, then its emergent time scale will lead to success within a short period of time. And that is what we are trying to do on this platform. That by coming together, because we were initially looking for guidance from the Quran, then we came together, and then we found out gradually that this message is for us, and what it contains, it has a recipe for success in a short time scale in this life. And without worrying it, that how soon we will get it, the Quran has told us that it is not up to you how to get the quick results. You just keep following the path as directed. What we need is to convince ourselves regarding this, and then to begin to work together towards this aim with a firm conviction that the laws of Allah are immutable and that they support human efforts striving towards the establishment of Al-Haq. Because Al-Haq has the ability to manifest itself if it is pursued as directed by the Quran. The attribute of Raheem is, in any case, functioning all the time in the human world. Its aspect related to Deen will only come into play when the attribute of Rahman has managed to do its task, i.e., in relation to establishing the system of Deen. So these two attributes are extremely helpful in not only understanding the Quranic value system, but also in terms of getting reassurance that it is a recipe, that the Quran can manifest its results as it manifested in the initial era of Islam when it is followed precisely the way it is asking us to follow it. It is a very precise formula, and if we stick to it, then we will get the results at some point in the future. In fact, we are already seeing the results of it by enhancing our understanding through these presentations which we are sharing on a regular basis. Why do we need Ad-Deen? So we go to the next verse, Malik Yawmiddin, a very short verse, but there is a whole word implicit in it. The consequence of removing these tyrannical forces from the path will be that such a system will become established in which neither any human being will be dependent on another human being nor subject to him. In this, the decisions on all matters will be according to the laws of Allah. This is that very system which has to ultimately overwhelm all self-made systems of life of human beings. This verse is translated in English as Master of the Deen of Judgment, and this is a grossly misleading meaning of the verse, as will become clear later. Because in the religious domain and the way these verses are translated, it looks as if Allah will be responsible for accountability in the day of judgment. As far as this word is concerned, nothing can be done. It is now up to human beings how to deal with other human beings under the man-made system. And we will see that that is not the case in this verse. This verse is revealing to us a great program which we need to follow. Explaining root of Malike. The root of the word Malik is this. The basic meanings of this root are to be master of something and in control, choice and intent or authority, a strong foundation, i.e., that support in which something is established. That means that through which some matter is resolved and reaches its desired conclusion. This is why cement or mud is called milakun, because by brick and stone becoming joined through this, each provides strength to the other, and in this way the wall reaches its completion. When this word is used for ordinary people, its meaning generally is of such a type of power and authority through which other human beings are made slaves, and the term mamluk comes from it. It is termed malukiyat or dictatorship, authoritarianism, despotism. Even democracy is also a form of malukiyat, because we can see that people at the top, they control other human beings through man-made laws. And we can see malukiyat of this aspect in today's world very clearly. All the wars are being launched by those who call themselves democratic. But when it is used for Allah, then obviously this will not mean tyrannical authority. Despite being the creator of everything, omnipotent and sovereign, Allah is not dictatorial. I highlighted it because Allah is dictatorial under the religious domain, because that is the concept which is concocted by human mind. Because once they see dictatorship in the human world, they think Allah is also not like that. Hence, when it will be declared to Allah belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, In every instance, this will mean that in the whole of the universe, his dominion and authority reigns, but this fundamental meaning will also be implicit in it that this authority of his will also be the support for the life and nourishment of things of the universe. And we know that everything in the universe follows Allah's laws. So Allah's control of the universe is through his laws, which human beings can understand. Expanding this verse a bit further, this authority is that cementing force due to which the elements of the universe are intertwined with each other as if these have become one single unit. And it is this mutual conjoining of theirs as a result of which the system of the universe is functioning with this balance and beauty. This is called muaddat. And it is from this respect that Allah also has the attribute of al-wadud, i.e. the one who takes the process of evolution forward by generating mutual attraction and amalgamation between the particles of the universe. So this attribute is very much applicable to the system of Deen, where mutual harmony and affection and respect for each other will under this attribute, and mu'mineen have to display this attribute. Wherever this attribute of Allah, that is Malkiyat, is mentioned in the Quran, it will need to be seen which of the above meanings is most suitable according to the context and background. In this verse of Surah Al-Fatiha, it will mean authority or dominion. Explaining the next word, Yawm, which is one can call it day, period, era, age. This word is commonly translated as day, i.e. that day which consists of 24 hours. And there are verses on that as well, where alternation of the day and night produce a 24-hour day. Undoubtedly, in the Arabic language, this word appears with this meaning as well, but its meaning is far broader than this. This word Yawm is also used for what we call a period or an age or a stage. Whatever prolonged and extended stages the universe has passed through to reach here, these have also been termed using the word Yawm. And it is from this point of view that it is stated that one Yawm of Allah's is equivalent to thousands and thousands of years of your reckoning. In fact, there is another verse as well. It is of 50,000 of years. In the verse being discussed, Yawm will mean time or era. It has also appeared in the Quran in connection with the functioning of the law of requital. For example, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ وَذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ. So over here, بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ, that is Allah's days, is mentioned. We sent the messenger Musa with our signs and telling him, bring out your people from darknesses into light and remind them with the days of Allah. So when Deen becomes established, those will be called the days of Allah. Explaining Ad-Deen. This is a very comprehensive term of the Quran in which the summary of its whole teaching is encompassed. This is its focal point. This is that central point around which all its commands, principles, values, and laws revolve and present their reason detail. By understanding the true meaning of this term, Islam can be comprehended, and if the Quranic concept of it is obscured in the minds, then nothing of Islam can be correctly comprehended. So it's an extremely important term, and we use it very often in our presentations. For example, neither its beliefs and concepts, nor its constituents and commands, nor its objectives and requirements, nor its need and outcome. This word contains vast meanings. On the one hand, its meanings are control, authority, rule, state, constitution, law, organization and administration, decision, concrete outcome, reward and punishment, the law of requital. But on the other hand, when this same word is used with reference to human beings, then its meanings are obedience, compliance, submission. And when its reference is to both Allah and man together, then its meanings will be obedience to the divine laws whose consequence manifests according to the laws defined by Allah. So when we are looking through these verses, we have to look at it that to which reference this word is being used. Is it in relation to Allah himself, or is it in relation to human beings, or it is in relation to both? Deen in the outer world and the universe. At this point, it is deemed appropriate to quote a comprehensive verse of Surah Al-Imran. It is stated, "Do they seek for other than the deen of Allah, while all creatures in the heavens and on earth have willing or unwilling bowed to His will," that is, to His laws, "and to Him shall they all be brought back." So deen is everywhere in the world. Whatever system we see around us working in the universe, for example, gravity, sun is coming out, moon is coming out, and these galaxies, they are all following deen of Allah. So in a wider sense, that is also part of deen. Do these people wish to adopt some other deen other than Allah's deen? Are they searching for some other deen? Do they not see that whatever is in the highs and lows of the universe is submitting before His laws, willingly or unwillingly? And it's an important term over here, that why willingly and why unwillingly. Willingly means that wherever they cannot go against it. For example, sun has to rise in the east, gravity has to be there to do its job. Earth is revolving around the sun, so it is doing it willingly. Unwillingly will be related to human beings, particularly because human beings, despite going against Allah's laws, are still following Allah's laws, because when they go against Allah's laws, the effects are according to that very deed which is going against the laws. For example, if someone puts his finger in fire, then his finger will burn. So unwillingly, it will happen because it will cause pain to him. This is that deen which encompasses the whole of the outer universe, i.e., that divine system according to which this system of the universe is functioning. From this, the meaning of deen becomes clear, i.e., that system which is established according to the divine laws. And we as students of the Quran have to look at it very carefully, that which laws are applicable, which value is applicable at some point, and when people transgress that value, what happens then? And when people follow that value, what advantage they get? Islam is deen, not religion. After this, it is directed that you too proclaim that we willingly submit before the laws of Allah only, and these are those laws which have continued to be given to mankind through the medium of the Anbiya. And Anbiya is the plural of Nabi. Nabi means the one who is the messenger of Allah and receives revelation from Allah, and have now been given in the Quran. This is what is known as Islam. In the next verse, it is stated, "If anyone desires a deen other than Islam, never will it be accepted of him, and in the hereafter he will be in the ranks of those who have lost." A very important verse. It is not somehow should be taken that Allah is rejecting them. Not at all. What the Quran is saying is that if you do not follow those laws and values which we have given to you to follow in your word, then you will suffer. You will not get the benefits which you think you might be getting, but actually you are in a loss because you are not following Allah's laws and values. Therefore, whoever adopts some other deen other than Al-Islam, which has been referred to above, that will not be worthy of acceptance before Allah. That is, it will not accrue those benefits which are associated with Al-Islam. So it is not something which is left to our choice. And for example, in the word of religion, all the rituals which we do, everyone says that you will get the benefits in the hereafter. Whereas the Quran very clearly says that whatever you do, the results must manifest in this life right in front of us. And such people will eventually witness in how great a loss they were. Hence, the system of deen is not otherworldly, it is very much about this human world. Deen needs power in the land and its own state. It is evident from this that deen is the name of that system which is shaped according to the divine laws, in which every individual accepts the authority of Allah and Allah alone, and in which the precisely correct outcome of his every deed becomes established, which is called a return or recompense. It is clear that such a system in which obedience and submission is to the divine laws is only possible when the Muslim Ummah, i.e. Jamaat-e-Momineen, has its own independent state in which they have full control and authority to implement these laws. In other words, for the establishment of deen and the existence of an independent state for Muslims is inescapable. And that is very important for us to understand and keep in mind that without having a piece of land, we cannot physically, tangibly display the benefits of learning about the system of Deen. Deen has to be practically established in some piece of land, and then it has to be practiced by those Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen so that people can see it as a model. In the religious domain, it doesn't matter that one can practice these rituals anywhere under the man-made systems. And that is why it is a misconception. It is actually a very gross self-deception, because the end of that is that people who think that they have been doing a lot good in this world will get nothing, because they will never be able to get that self which is required for establishing the system of Deen. So understanding these things is part of learning and acquiring that self which can be of help to the system of Deen. So it is not otherworldly. Prior to the establishment of this state, groundwork needs to be carried out, and those who wish to take on this responsibility on behalf of Allah, and that means as His companions on the planet, need to go through a well-defined process of education, training, and self-development. Over here, I've quoted a verse, لَقَدْ مَنَ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. Allah did confer a great favor on Mu'mineen, and we can understand that favor after coming to the Quran, that how much development, self-development has taken place within our own self, how much understanding we have acquired, which we could have never got it without the Quran. When He sent among them a messenger from among themselves, that is, messenger was a human being and he was following it so that others could learn from him, that if he as a human being can follow it, we can follow too. And now, of course, we have to do it ourselves. There is no messenger coming. Reciting to them His verses, carrying out their self-development, and educating them in the book and its hikmat. So we are at this stage. That is, we are carrying out our self-development at our own, and also educating ourselves by coming together in the book of Allah, and of course going through it in our own time, and why each and every verse is important in terms of understanding the system of Deen. So there is a lot of work required at this stage, which we are carrying out ourselves by coming together and then dispersing and doing it individually. While before that, they had been without guidance, and that is another very important point, that we were not guided before we came to the Quran. And the proof of that is, the evidence of that is that the things which we are learning in terms of human psyche and the changes which are taking place within us, that is our own psyche, and the things which we are doing now outerward through salih deeds, we couldn't have done it on these lines without the help of the Quran. And Quran calls it Zalalim Mubin. It was very evidently clear that we were misguided, and we have to accept it, because without this acceptance, we cannot recognize where we were and where we are and where we are going. Next is, without power and own state, Ad-Deen is not possible. What is the formula for acquiring power? In the absence of this, living a life according to Ad-Deen or Al-Islam is impossible. This state is a natural consequence of Iman and Salih deeds, and its aim is to establish Deen. See how this reality is elucidated in a clear and comprehensive style in this verse of Surah An-Nur, where it is stated. I will say that we should go through this verse frequently just to reassure us. Whenever we feel that nothing is happening, we should go through this verse to reassure us that the path we are pursuing is the correct one. Allah has promised to those among you who have Iman and work righteous deeds that He will of a surety grant them power in the land as He granted it to those before them. So this is the statement of fact. This is a statement of the recipe or a formula which is given in the Quran to acquire power from Allah's laws. That He will establish in authority their Deen. Just see the word Deen has appeared in this verse over here. The one which He has chosen for them. So this Deen is chosen for those Mu'mineen who have chosen to become Mu'mineen themselves. And They wish to become the companions of Allah to carry out those responsibilities which Allah has specified in the Quran. See, all of this thing is how intricately it is interconnected, and our psyche has to come to grips with it. And that He will change their state after the fear in which they lived to one of security and peace. If in the world of 2024 we can feel that fear everywhere, that uncertainty everywhere, then in order to convert that, we have to follow this formula of Allah. They will follow me and not associate aught with me, which means they will never ever mix anything else with the Quranic concept of Deen. They will not mix anything with the Quran. And that is an absolute basic fundamental condition for the enactment of this recipe which is put forward by the Quran. If any do reject after this, they are rebellious and wicked. So those who rejected it after the initial era of Islam, we can see what happened to them. We can look at the history of Muslims of the last over 1,000 years. Ad-Deen has two important aspects: establishment of Salat and execution of Zakat. Hence the next verse after the above states, so establish Salat and execute Zakat and obey the messenger. And over here obeying the messenger, because now no more messenger is coming, which means the message left behind him in the form of the Quran. So if he could follow it as a human being, so can we, so that you may receive Rahm. So in order to receive this Rahmat, that is Ar-Rehman and Raheem, all actions, all benefits which are associated with those two attributes, we can get them by establishing the system of Salat and Zakat under the system of Deen. Need for central authority. The purpose of establishment of power in the land is so that Ad-Deen becomes implemented, and as a result of this, you will become enabled to carry out the responsibility of establishing Salat and executing Zakat, and you can obey the messenger. This type of establishment in the land had taken place during the illustrious era of Rasulullah, and the very first head of state or central authority of this state was Rasulullah himself. And in our case, in today's world, it will be the Quran itself, because the humanity has reached that stage of intellectual development and reasoning prowess that they can follow the book. A body of Mu'mineen will manage all these affairs by following the book. Hence, the practical shape of the establishment and strength of this system was simply this, that its central authority should be obeyed. This obedience was in reality to the divine laws themselves, but since their implementation was via this authority, therefore obedience to him was declared essential. This system was not confined to the virtuous life of Rasulullah. And here comes a very powerful verse. Muhammad is no more than a messenger. Many were the messengers that passed away before him. If he died or were slain, will you then turn back on your heels? If any did turn back on his heels, not the least harm will he do to Allah, but Allah will swiftly reward those who serve him with gratitude, and which is by following the Quran. Very important verse. Again, we should keep this in mind, that Deen as a system is not connected to one human being, that if one human being dies, the Deen disappears. And that is why it is important for the students of the Quran to understand that a system must have very solid and concrete foundation on permanent values. And people who are managing the affairs, they should be 100% convinced that this system is for their benefit. And if this system goes, then we will go back to the world of 2024 and we can see what kind of a world we have at present. Psychological need for the system of Ad-Deen. As we have seen in the first two verses of this surah, human creation is part of a grand program of Allah in which human choice and intent plays a central role. Being endowed with a self, which is based on our I, we possess the potentials to develop it further with the help of the Quranic guidance. This development is simply not possible without its guidance. This process only commences when we become interested in this guidance after becoming dissatisfied with the man-made systems and its problems. Those people who are not dissatisfied with the man-made system and do not reject it wholly, and when they read the Quran, they can never ever see the system of Deen over there. They will only see their own personal salvation and some kind of a swab which is related to the domain of religion. A few verses help in this regard. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ ثُمَّ مَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا يَوْمُ الدِّينِ يَوْمَ لَا تَمْلِكُ نَفْسٌ لِنَفْسٍ شَيْئًا وَالْأَمْرُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلَّهِ. And what will explain to you what the day of Ad-Deen is? Again, what will explain to you what the day of Ad-Deen is? And there is a lot of emphasis on Ad-Deen in this verse. When no self shall have power aught for another, for the command that day will be with Allah. This is something which needs our very profound reflection repeatedly, and we should keep it in mind all the time, that under the system of Deen, no human being has a right to be a master of another human being. That is making him obey his laws. Not at all. And those who manage this system should also have absolutely no desire to rule over others, to make laws to subjugate others and slave others, which we see in the word of 2024. So what Quran is saying over here is that when you establish this system, then Allah's laws everyone will follow, and that is not slavery, that is not subjugation, because those laws are meant to develop your own self. Those are the ones which will give you success and prosperity in this life as well as in the life of the hereafter. And this is something which we have to come to grips with, our own freedom, what it means to us, how much important it is. Because by virtue of possessing choice and intent, we are not supposed to be following the laws of any human being, but we should follow the laws of Allah, because that is where our eminence and loftiness lies. It is clear from this that we will only feel the need for Ad-Deen when we will fully come to grips with the enslavement, that is economic as well as psychological, imposed by man-made systems, and how these systems subjugate fellow human beings in the world. That inferiority one feels by being subjugated to another human being, that enslavement, that helplessness. For example, in today's world, just one permanent value, that no one has the right to draw borders in the world, and how inferior one feels by carrying these passports around and visas around and being checked on every place, and as if one does not belong to this planet. And it is a matter of feeling that humiliation which will help us to come to the Quran and understand for the system of Deen. That brotherhood in which there are no borders and people travel around freely wherever they wish to go, because it is Allah's word and He wants us to enjoy it and travel freely in it. The whole matter becomes crystal clear when we reflect on it in the light of human self-development and its continuation beyond our physical death. Understanding the need for Ad-Deen includes knowledge of the human psyche. I have quoted very famous 3 verses from Surah Al-Ma'un. أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدُعُّ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَىٰ طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Have you noticed the state of that person who claims to be on Islam but in practice falsifies Deen? His state is such that he pushes him away who is left alone in the society. He neither helps the deprived nor encourages others to do so. Another powerful fact related to Deen, La ikraha fi Deen qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayyi faman yakfur bit-taghut wa yu'min billah. There is no compulsion in the matter of Deen. Absolutely no compulsion. If I am on this path, it is willingly I am on this path because I know this path is for me. I was looking for this path. That is why I am here. And for all the signs and reasons should be clear to me, so that when I follow this path, it is with full conviction of my heart and mind. Because if there is an iota of doubt, iota of uncertainty somewhere, that I'm not likely to stick to this path, and these doubts destroy us. This is like the cancer which eats up our body. Our psychology needs total commitment to a particular path of life in order to get the best out of it. The path of truth stands out clear from the path of evil. Whoever rejects Taghut and accepts Iman in Allah. Just see, Yakfur means that the action has to be taken. And when we say human, it means action has to be taken. So in order to reject Taghut, we have to take an action through the use of our mind and heart. And when we have to accept what Allah has revealed to us, then again we have to devote full attention to it. A verse on dividing deen by making sects. Inna lazina farraku deenahum wa kanu shiyan lasta minhum fi shayin innama amruhum ilallahi summa yunabbi'uhum bima kanu yafalun. As for those who divide their deen, because they are divided within themselves, they haven't come to the Quran. Because it is through Quran one has to remove his differences. And if those differences still exist in our mind, then we haven't really accepted deen as noted in the previous verse. And break it up into sects. You have no part in them in the least. Their affair is with Allah. He will in the end tell them the truth of all that they did. And Allah is already telling them what they are doing by being divided. They are suffering in the world. And the biggest suffering is that humiliation, that backwardness of intellect and mind. In every sphere of life, these divided people remain behind. Because evil also becomes united to get the results of evil. And these people, those who claim to follow the book of Allah and are divided, means that they are doing the things correctly. That is why they suffer. Because by following the Quran, we simply cannot suffer, and we would have had deen somewhere, someplace in the world. Their affair being with Allah means that the law of requital will make them suffer the consequences of being disunited, a heinous crime in the book of Allah. We can witness the effects of this sectarianism across the so-called Muslim world. For example, fatalism, controlled by the West and the powerful, subjugated in every aspect of life, intellectually backward, immersed in false beliefs and superstitions. And when somebody points to them, they become annoyed, and they are willing to even get rid of such people. Extremely religious, which produces no results. Ridden with conflicts and divisions, living in continuous states of fear and stress, dependent on others technologically, absence of research and development. Worst of all, despite possessing the Quran, nothing in the life of the hereafter, blind here, hence blind in the hereafter. And we covered this under this verse in Surah Bani Israel. The next slide is a few more reflections on the human psyche. An interesting verse of Pharaoh's system. And Deen has used, and Quran has used this term Deen for human man-made systems as well. وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ ذَرُونِي أَقْتُلْ مُوسَى وَلْيَدْعُ رَبَّهُ إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَنْ يُبَدِّلَ دِينَكُمْ أَوْ أَنْ يُظْهِرَ فِي الْأَرْضِ الْفَسَادَ. Pharaoh said, "Leave me to slay the messenger Musa and let him call on his Rabb. What I fear is lest he should change your deen." See, he was worried about his own system, and Quran has called it deen as well. Or lest he should cause fasad to appear in the land. So Pharaoh was worried that the messenger Musa and Bani Israel will somehow change his system, and which was a fact. The Wahi of Allah comes to change and replace the man-made system with the system of deen. That is, the man-made deen is to be replaced by Allah's deen. It was also deen sent to other messengers. Shara lakum min al-deene ma wassa bihi Nuhan wallazi awhayna alayka wa ma wassayna bihi Ibrahima wa Musa wa Isa an aqimuddina wa la tatafarraqu fihi. The same deen has he established for you as that which he enjoined on the messenger Nuh, that which we have sent by Wahi to you, and that which we enjoined on messengers Ibrahim, Musa, and Isa. Namely, that you should remain steadfast and firm in deen, cause no deviance therein. The aim of providing guidance through the Quran is to help those who rise up with firm resolve to establish deen with this firm iman that Huwallazi arsala rasulahu bil huda wa dinal haqqi li yuzhirahu ala ad-deen kullihi walau karihal mushrikun. And it's interesting, this verse is also recited in the religious domain as well. But assumption over there is that somehow Allah will do it himself, because they do not correlate it with the rest of the Quran. They just pick it up and give them some kind of a self-satisfaction because they don't want to act. They don't want to change their own psyche. Whereas the Quran also says that Allah does not change the state of a people unless they change what is within their own psyche. It is He who has sent His messenger with guidance and the Deen of Al-Haq to proclaim it over all deens, even though mushrikeen of every era may detest it. And mushrikeen over here means those who mix up the two. That is, Allah's guidance with their own desires are from other books. Whereas kufr is to totally reject the Quran, and there is no question of mixing up. Why mushrikeen is mentioned here and not kafireen? Because these kafirin will push forward these mushrikeen to counter the Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen. They all belong to Hizb Shaitan. And that is an interesting thing, that these kafirin are the ones who will push these mushrikeen in front, because they are the ones who are bidding on their behalf, and they are intellectually backward as compared to kafirin. And this is something which we should reflect a bit more closely. Next is finally some points of interest from our journey so far. We have seen from the first 4 verses of Surah Al-Fateha that Allah is directing our attention to His program of Rububiyyat in the universe, of which planet Earth is an important part. The creation of man possessing choice and intent is extremely important and is for a lofty purpose which does not end with his physical death. He possesses a self with immense potentials, and these remain dormant and unactioned if he does not bring them out using the Quranic value system. We have also seen that man's thoughts, words, and deeds play an important role in influencing his psyche and the psyche of his fellow beings. These verses tell us that Allah as Rabb has defined a clear path for self-development for man from birth to physical death and far beyond. His creation is al-haq and not batil, as those conjecture who live an unguided life. Because human beings wish to follow their own unbridled desires. And if somebody tries to tell them or intervenes, then he does not like this intervention, because that means not to follow his own desires. And once these human beings acquire power, then they start getting that kind of enjoyment out of it, inverted commas, which then destroys the whole fabric of the human world or human society. Then Allah provides assurance to man that if he chooses to follow the path of Wahi, then he will never find himself alone, as Quranic guidance will take him through every challenge of life presented by the man-made systems. A great reassurance provided to us that this system, if it is followed, it will overcome the man-made systems. And the only condition is that we have to follow the book of Allah. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Ad-Deen.